Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 95, and we're going to cover 1 Samuel chapters 13 through 15. Last time we left off with Samuel's address to Israel, and Saul was confirmed as king, and we start to pick up with Saul's reign. In fact, it says in verse 1 that he was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 40 years. Now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, while 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah of Benjamin. But he had sent away the rest of the people, each to his tent. Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." All Israel heard the news that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become odious to the Philistines. The people were then summoned to Saul at Gilgal. And so we're about to get another big battle between the Philistines and Saul. Verse 5 depicts this. It says, "Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel, 3,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and the people like the sand which were on the seashore in abundance. And they came up and camped in Michmash. Now Saul was in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling." It says, "Now he waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, 'Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings.' And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and greet him. But Samuel said, 'What have you done?'" And this is how it always happens, right? When we're waiting on someone, the minute we text them, "Where are you?" or "Where you at?" they're pulling up in the driveway. So Saul was commanded by Samuel to wait 7 days in Gilgal, but anxiety started to creep in his heart because the people were starting to scatter in fear over the battle. And so he was too. So what he did was he was supposed to wait on Samuel's assistance with the sacrifice before they went into battle. And he took matters in his own hand. And obviously this was a test from the Lord through Samuel of Saul's character to see if he would actually wait. When pressure was on him, will he still obey the word of the Lord? And there's a lesson in that for you as well. What do you do when pressure is on you? Is a diamond created or do pipes burst? And this is really good. Like, we need to see how we trust the Lord when we're under pressure. That reveals to you who you truly are. Many of us can get it right under comfortable circumstances, in a laxed environment, or on familiar ground and in familiar territory. But what happens when you're under duress, when the heat is on? Do you jettison all of your biblical principles, all of your memory verses, all of your trust and your faith and your hope in God? Or do you double down on it? I'm telling you, pressure will reveal that if you just pay attention to yourself and how you operate and respond during it. And something major happens here because Saul disobeys him. Look at what happens. Samuel said to Saul, "You have acted foolishly, and you have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom shall not endure." What is he saying there? Now Saul is still king, but remember, kings can have dynasties, meaning their successor could be in their family, one of their sons. And what Samuel is telling Saul here is that you won't have a dynasty. The kingship will end with you because of this sin. It says, "The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord has commanded you." And that moves us into chapter 14. And we start to hear more about Jonathan, Saul's son. And Jonathan is the real hero of the story. He's actually willing to give his life for David. And we see here in chapter 14 that Jonathan and a young man who was carrying his armor went over to the Philistines' garrison, but they didn't tell Saul about it, for they were staying on the outskirts of Gibeah, and the people with him were about 600 men. And so Jonathan gives the plan. He says, "Look, we're going to cross over here where the Philistines are, and if they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and we will not go up. But if they say, 'Come up,' then we will know the Lord has given them to us in our hand." So they say, "Come up." And Jonathan says, "The Lord has given them to us." And so they went in and they slaughtered 20 men. And this creates chaos in the camp. It says in verse 15, "And there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among the people. Even the garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked, so that it became a great trembling. So it says, so the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond the Beth Aven. Then we move into a foolish order given by Saul that nobody could eat. It says, now the men of Israel were hard pressed that day, and Saul put the people under an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food before evening until I have avenged myself on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. Jonathan was not aware of this oath that Saul had made. It says in verse 27 that he took his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. And this is science, right? You need calories to get energy. And this honey was food for Jonathan to give him energy to battle. And it's just showing you how foolish this order and vow was from Saul, because you have soldiers who need food, who need calories to battle. And he's making this oath saying that they can't eat. And Jonathan actually calls him a troubler of the land. In 29, he says, my father is a troubler of the land. I have tasted a little honey. How much more if only the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. Now the slaughter amongst the Philistines has not been great. And so they go and fight the Philistines, and they conquer them. They rushed upon them. They were very weary, but they greedily take the spoils. They took the sheep, the oxen, the calf, and slew them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Saul, saying, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord and eating with the blood. So what's happening here is because of the vow that Saul gave, they're disobeying the law found in Leviticus by eating raw meat and not draining the blood out of meat. And you see the consequences of bad leadership and Saul not allowing them to eat. And so Saul says, let's go down after the Philistines by night and take the spoil among them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And so Saul inquires to God, shall I go after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hands of Israel? But he did not answer him on that day. Saul said, draw here, all of you chiefs, and let's investigate and see how this sin has happened. And so they cast lot, and the lot falls on Jonathan. And this causes Saul to question Jonathan, saying, what have you done? And he tells him, look, I tasted a little honey at the end of the staff that was in my hand. And Saul said, may God do this to me, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. But the people stand up for Jonathan because he's the hero of the story. They're saying to him, must Jonathan die, who brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, not one hair on his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God till this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. And you just see that the people are even standing up for Jonathan, and they won't allow those orders to go through of him being killed. And the chapter ends of the constant warfare that Saul has as he's taken over the kingdom of Israel. He fought all of the enemies on every side, and it gives a detailed list of who he fights. And this chapter ends saying, now the war against the Philistines was severe all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any mighty man or any valiant man, he attached him to his staff, meaning he would add them to his army if he saw that they were good warriors. You're going to see this Philistine opposition all the way through Saul's life. And our last chapter for today is 15, and we see Saul's disobedience. And in this chapter, they're going to fight Amalek and the Amalekites. It says here in verse 1, and Samuel said to Saul, the Lord has sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And so remember our conquest in Joshua. This is a battle where everything goes under the ban. You don't take anything. And so Saul summons a team and he goes out. And verse 7, Saul defeats them. But look at what he does in verse 8. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly. But everything despised and worthless, he utterly destroyed. So politically and militarily, this is wise. Like, he's taking good resources, but he's being completely disobedient. And just to show you how disobedient he's being, this was a battle that started in Exodus when the people came out of the wilderness. Remember when they had to hold Moses' hands up? This is the battle when they were fighting Amalek, and they win this battle. But God makes a decree. He says, because they attack you, I will utterly destroy the Amalekites. And here's the opportunity to do that. But Saul disobeys. And I want to show you how disobedience can affect future generations. Because Saul didn't fulfill this, this creates the book of Esther. Haman is an Agagite, which is from this tribe of the Amalekites, from Amalek. And because Saul is disobedient here, this creates a problem in the future through a man named Haman who wants to extinguish the Jews. That hate still continues on into the future. And that could have been cut off here if Saul would have been obedient. And it just goes to show us we don't know the effects of our disobedience and our sin. So we do well just to obey. And Samuel rebukes him for this. This is our famous verse. Even this is quoted in the New Testament in verse 22, as in obeying the voice of the Lord, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. What does that mean? To follow what the Lord is telling us to do is much better than giving gifts or presuming what you think the Lord wants, giving him this beautiful, ostentatious presentation or sacrifice and showering him with blessings and gifts, trying to honor him, is not as good as obedience. And I'll tell you why, because the God of the universe knows what he wants and he lays that out for us. And so it's disrespectful to say, okay, I'm not going to consider that. I'm going to give God what I think he wants, and I'm going to shower him with all of these beautiful things. And this is wicked in the sight of God. And clearly you can see why, because that would be wicked in your eyes too. If you told somebody clearly what to do, they disregard it and then come back and bring you a bunch of gifts and things that they think you like. That would offend you because you told them what you like. And this is the same here. And because of that, Samuel tells Saul that because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Now notice the difference. What did he do the first time? He stripped him of his dynasty, meaning he would not have a legacy or none of his children would be king. Now he just stripped him of his kingship, meaning Saul, not only will you not have a dynasty, you are no longer king. And Saul confessed. He says, I've sinned, I've transgressed the commandment of the Lord. And he says, pardon my sin and return with me that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. As Samuel turned to go, Saul seized the edge of his robe and tore it. And so Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to your neighbor who is better than you. Also, the glory of the Lord will not lie or change his mind, and he is not a man that he should change his mind. And Samuel asks for Agag and tell the people to bring him here. And he kills him. He tells them, as your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hewed Agag into pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. And Samuel went to Ramah, but Saul went up to his house at Gibeah. And Samuel did not see Saul again to the day of his death, for Samuel grieved over Saul. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king of Israel. Sad stuff. But this is the king that the people wanted, and you're seeing the fruit of that. But now God is about to raise up his true king, and we're about to see him tomorrow. You guys take care.